I watched from our car window as we pulled up to the single-story cabin. Built from dark, weathered wood, it possessed an aged charm that blended seamlessly with the surrounding forest. Eleanor switched off the engine and smiled. "We're finally here," she said. "Isn't it beautiful?" I nodded, taking in the cabin nestled among towering pines, their branches heavy with fresh snow. A stone pathway wound from the gravel driveway to the deep red front door, a striking contrast to the cabin's wood exterior. Above it hung a small, hand-carved sign, "Welcome to the Getaway." Inside, the cabin felt warm and inviting. Old framed photographs and a few mounted deer heads adorned the walls. The compact living room centered around a stone fireplace with a sturdy wooden mantel. A plush, worn couch and two matching armchairs faced the fireplace. A small coffee table laden with magazines and board games nestled between them. A half wall separated the living room from the kitchen, just a few steps away. The kitchen boasted basic appliances, a refrigerator, gas stove, and microwave, and speckled gray granite countertops topped with wooden cabinets brimming with dishes and utensils. Eleanor unpacked the groceries, efficiently placing cans, fresh vegetables, and other food items into cabinets and the refrigerator. I crouched before the fireplace, arranging crumpled newspaper and small twigs in its base, carefully adding a couple of logs on top. A struck match ignited the kindling. Flames flickered warmly, casting a comforting glow across the room. Dusting my hands, a wave of relief washed over me. Eleanor's eyes met mine from the kitchen as the fire crackled, sheltering us from the outside chill. Everything felt right. "Thomas," Eleanor called from the kitchen, her eyes fixed on her phone screen. "The weather forecast says a snowstorm is coming. Should we be worried?" I heard the comforting crackle of burning pine as I tossed another log onto the already roaring fire. The scent of burning wood filled the room. "We should be fine," I replied, brushing off splinters. "We have enough canned food, water, and firewood to last us a week." Eleanor stepped into the living room, phone still in hand, her expression now more serious. "Well," she said, "according to this, the storm could escalate and last several days. Very high wind speeds are expected." We locked eyes, sharing a look of concern that we quickly pushed aside. We didn't want to spoil the getaway we'd anticipated so much. "Let's not let this ruin our day," I suggested, trying to lighten the mood. "How about we hit those nearby trails for some skiing?" Eleanor nodded, her face brightening. "Sounds like a plan. Let's make the most of the outdoors while we can." We dressed in thermal layers, fastened our boots, and grabbed our ski poles and skis. Stepping outside, the chill of the winter air hit us, but it felt invigorating. The snow crunched beneath our boots on the quiet path to the ski trails, a short walk from the cabin. As we glided along, the weight of our earlier concerns began to lift. The forest felt peaceful, its towering trees cloaked in fresh snow. Empty bird nests, packed with snow like tiny bowls, were visible, the birds absent from their branches. The sky, initially a bright, clear blue, darkened to a heavy gray as we skied, the approaching storm palpable. By the time we returned to the cabin, the first snowflakes of the storm were falling, the wind picking up, making the trees sway and groan. "We made it back just in time," Eleanor said, locking the cabin door behind us as the wind howled, signaling the storm's arrival. "Wow, it's really coming down," she added, removing her wet coat, hanging it on a wooden peg by the door, and placing her snow-caked boots on the designated mat to dry. "Yeah, it is," I agreed, glancing out the window. The snowflakes were unusually large, accumulating rapidly. ground was already blanketed in white. The pine trees were quickly becoming obscured, their green needles barely visible under the heavy snow. "Let's stay in for the rest of the day," I suggested. With our outdoor plans canceled, we focused on indoor activities to pass the time. For dinner, we cooked together, preparing a simple pasta dish with canned sauce. The aroma filled the kitchen, creating a cozy atmosphere. After dinner, we played board games. Eleanor chose a classic Monopoly. We set it up on the coffee table in front of the fire, its dancing flames providing a comforting backdrop to our friendly competition. Eleanor won, but the game successfully lifted our spirits. Despite the enjoyable evening, the relentless snowfall outside tinged the atmosphere with a sense of urgency. The wind howled through the gaps in the cabin, making it feel as though the storm was knocking at our door. Before bed, we stoked the fire, adding extra logs to keep the cabin warm throughout the night. By morning, I knew, without looking outside, that the storm was far from over. The light usually flooding through the curtains was noticeably dimmer. The wind's moan was louder. I went straight to the pantry to check our supplies. The situation was worse than I'd initially thought. Our food was limited to a couple of cans of soup, some instant noodles, and a few granola bars. The stark reality sank in. We needed to carefully ration our remaining supplies. "Eleanor," I said, my voice tinged with concern I couldn't fully hide, "we need to ration our food." She set down the book she'd been reading, her face tightening. "How bad is it?" I leaned against the kitchen counter, looking at the meager contents of our pantry. "We have enough for maybe 3 days, if we're careful, and that's not even considering the firewood, which is also dwindling." Eleanor sat down abruptly in an armchair near the fireplace, wrapping her arms around herself as if suddenly cold. "What do we do now?" "We stay put," I said, forcing an air of confidence. "The storm can't last forever. We just have to wait it out." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, her worry turning to disbelief. "Wait it out with limited food and even less fuel for warmth? What if the storm doesn't stop soon?" I sat beside her, taking her hands in mine. "Yes, we have no other choice. Going out in this storm is too risky. We could get lost or worse." We dedicated the rest of the day to conservation. At lunchtime, we shared a can of soup, eating slowly to make it last. We kept the fire at a minimum, just enough to prevent the cabin from becoming unbearably cold, saving the larger logs for the night. We both layered on extra clothing. Eleanor wore 2 sweaters and wrapped herself in a blanket. I wore a thermal shirt under my regular one. We both donned thick socks to keep our feet warm. As the day wore on, it became evident the storm had no intention of stopping. The wind continued to howl, shaking the cabin's windows and making eerie sounds as it swept through the nearby trees. We took turns checking the fire, increasingly conscious of how precious each piece of firewood had become. When nightfall came, we ate a small dinner of instant noodles, cooked with less water to conserve fuel. Neither of us spoke much. The gravity of our situation had sunk in. We went to bed early to save energy, lying side by side under multiple blankets, our empty stomachs adding to the discomfort. Throughout the night, the storm relentlessly assaulted the world outside our cabin. The wind howled and groaned, a constant reminder of the unforgiving conditions beyond our walls. Despite the noise, we tried to sleep, knowing we would need all our strength for the days ahead. I woke to repetitive scratching against the wood. Eleanor's eyes were wide open, mirroring my concern. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, tightening her grip on the blankets. "Yeah," I replied. my voice barely above a whisper. It's not just the wind. We lay there for agonizing moments, waiting for the noise to fade, but it didn't. I swung my legs out of bed, putting on clothes, layering a heavy jacket over my shirt and pulling on sturdy boots. I'm going to check it out, I told her, catching her eye as I fastened the last bootlace. Be careful, she responded, her face etched with worry. Approaching the front door, I gripped the handle with apprehension. A blast of frigid air invaded the room as I opened it, rogue snowflakes swirling in and settling on our worn doormat. Stepping outside, the porch light illuminated the front of our cabin. What I saw next made my stomach churn. Words gouged into the wood of the door, carved with a force suggesting fury or desperation. The message was chillingly simple. Leave now. What is it? Eleanor's voice jolted me from my focus. She emerged from the cabin, her face wrapped in a scarf, her eyes filled with curiosity and concern. I pointed at the message. Someone, or something, is sending us a very clear message. They don't want us here. Her eyes scanned the crude letters. I could feel the tension stiffening her posture. This has to be some sort of prank, I said, doubt heavy in my voice. Maybe local kids or something. You heard the same scratching sound I did, Eleanor countered, biting her lip thoughtfully. It didn't sound like local kids to me. She nodded. You're right. The noise was eerie. It didn't feel harmless. We can't ignore this. Going back out into the storm is off the table, I asserted, urgency creeping into my tone. We're almost out of food and firewood. We have to do something. Okay, Eleanor said, her eyes a mix of resolve and unease. What's the plan? First, let's check the perimeter of the cabin, I said. Look for signs or clues that might give us a hint about who or what left that message. We wasted no time, quickly layering on sweaters and jackets, pulling on insulated snow boots, and zipping up against the cold. I grabbed a flashlight and a sturdy branch from near the fireplace to use as a weapon. Eleanor took her phone, intending to use its camera to document any unusual findings. Opening the front door and stepping into the chilling air, we started to circle the cabin. The snow crunched underfoot as I shone the flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness and casting elongated shadows. Then we saw them. Footprints leading from the forest's tree line to our cabin and back into the woods. These weren't ordinary footprints. They were large, with elongated toes, unlike any human or animal tracks we'd ever seen. The snow around them was freshly disturbed, indicating their recent origin. My heart raced as the gravity of our situation became increasingly apparent. We need to be careful, Eleanor whispered, her fingers gripping my arm. These prints are nothing like the ones we made, or anything we saw yesterday. This is something different, something unfamiliar. I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. Something was out there, and whatever it wasn't friendly. We exchanged a look, realizing our initial plans for a peaceful escape had drastically changed. Now, the focus was on understanding what lurked in the forest and, more importantly, surviving. We ventured deeper into the forest, my flashlight illuminating the path as the footprints continued to guide us. The trees were tall, with thick trunks and bare limbs reaching towards the sky, weighed down by the accumulating snow. The forest floor was covered in a thick layer of snow, crunching under our boots with every step. The air was still, except for the intermittent creaking of branches under the pressure of the snowfall. About 15 minutes into our investigation, Our eyes were drawn to a peculiar sight. A piece of torn, faded fabric hanging from a low branch. It looked like part of a coat or perhaps a bag. I shone the flashlight on it. "What do you make of this?" I asked Eleanor. She took out her phone and snapped a picture. "I really don't know," she said. "This is unsettling. Who would be out here in this extreme weather, especially in such an isolated place? And why leave us a message like that?" Confused and shaken, we decided to return to the cabin. The feeling in the air changed as we retraced our steps, becoming more oppressive and heavier. A chilling sensation crawled up my spine. It felt as if we were being watched. I quickened my pace, Eleanor matching it. Finally, the cabin came into view, its structure a welcome sight against the dark forest. We climbed the steps. I hurriedly unlocked the door. The moment we were inside, I locked it behind us. We both exhaled deeply, relief washing over us, but it was short-lived. We were back in the cabin, but the realization that we weren't alone, that someone or something didn't want us there, sat heavily between us. "We need to take turns keeping watch tonight," I said, my voice a mix of determination and unease. Eleanor gave a simple nod, her face pale but resolute. "You're right. We can't let our guard down." Gone was the sense of comfort and relaxation we'd initially felt. The cabin felt more like a confining space, the walls closing in on us. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Each creak of the wood and gust of wind outside added another layer of unease. We sat on opposite ends of the sofa, lost in our own thoughts, grappling with the reality that our peaceful winter getaway had turned into something akin to a prison. The fireplace, once a source of warmth and coziness, was now a dwindling source of heat. Each log we added felt like a significant decision, its consumption measured against the cold we would face without it. The fire flickered and crackled, its glow diminishing as the embers lost their fight against the cold. Our conversations were sparse, limited to necessities like when to switch night watch or if we heard a peculiar noise outside. The unspoken question loomed. Who or what was behind this? What did they want? And, most urgently, how do we get out of this? My eyes were repeatedly drawn to the window, each time with a sense of dread. I half expected to see someone or something staring back at me. Yet each time, I found only a blanket of darkness speckled with the relentless snowfall, which showed no sign of stopping. The world outside was a void, a swirling mass of flakes and shadows, as if nature itself was conspiring to keep us here, isolated and vulnerable. Each hour felt longer than the last, stretching out in that small, confined space. The anxiety built, a gnawing sensation in the pit of my stomach that wouldn't go away. With every tick of the clock, the danger became increasingly real, a truth we could no longer avoid or dismiss. In the morning, a dim gray light filtered through the curtains. The fire had gone out, leaving only a pile of ash in the fireplace. The cold had seeped in, making every movement a struggle. I looked at the clock. 7:30 a.m. Eleanor was wrapped in a blanket, her eyes heavy but alert. "Did anything happen on your watch?" I asked, rubbing my arms for warmth. "No," she replied. "Just the usual sounds of the forest and the wind." "Same here," I replied. But we both knew usual had a different meaning now. The first task was to assess our supplies. We were down to a few cans of soup, some crackers, and a bag of rice. Not much, especially since we didn't know how long we'd be stuck. "We have to make this last," Eleanor said, setting aside a can for today's meal. I nodded, remembering the firewood. We were running low, just a few logs left, enough for maybe another day or two if we were conservative. after a quick, sparing breakfast, we sat down to talk. The carved message on the door and the torn fabric we'd found in the forest weighed on our minds. We couldn't dismiss them as random acts of nature or a prank anymore. "We need a plan," Eleanor said, breaking the silence. "Yes, we do," I agreed. "Staying put is our best option given the storm, but we need more information." "I say we venture a bit further into the forest today," I suggested. "See if we find anything that can tell us who or what is behind this." Eleanor nodded, and we prepared for another expedition. Bracing ourselves against the intensified morning cold, I could see my breath fogging in the air as I zipped up my jacket. Eleanor adjusted her gloves. She pressed the button on her flashlight, its beam instantly illuminating the surroundings. "Ready?" I asked, my hand firm around the large stick I'd chosen as a makeshift weapon. "Ready," she answered, her tone a mix of resolve and apprehension. We opened the cabin door. The hinges creaked slightly, a sound that felt loud in the morning's quiet. A burst of chilly air swept into the cabin, making me grateful for my heavy jacket. We stepped out, leaving behind the relative safety of the cabin. The door closed with a thud, finalizing our decision to venture into the unknown. The forest's heavy atmosphere immediately greeted us. The trees stood tall, their branches devoid of leaves, but covered in a layer of snow that reflected the weak morning light. A palpable sense of foreboding hung in the air, as if the forest itself was sending us a warning. As we took our first steps, the snow underfoot offered a soft but chilling cushion. My boots pressed down, each step accompanied by a crunching sound that felt loud in the otherwise silent woods. We proceeded cautiously, aware that the noise could attract unwanted attention. Eleanor led the way with her flashlight, its beam moving from left to right as she scanned the path ahead. Every once in a while, the light would catch something that made us pause. A twisted root that looked almost like a hand, or the eyes of a small animal reflecting back at us. But so far, no sign of anything more ominous. The journey felt both short and endless. With each step, the weight of our situation bore down on us, making the forest seem denser and our actions more deliberate. Despite the unsettling environment, there was a shared understanding that we needed to keep going. Turning back was not an option, at least not yet. My senses were on high alert, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. After what felt like a considerable amount of time, Eleanor's flashlight beam landed on another chilling message. "Stay away," crudely but deliberately carved into the thick bark of a tree. "We're definitely not alone," I remarked, my voice higher than I'd liked. My eyes scanned the forest's perimeter, searching for any movement or irregularity. Eleanor's fingers dug into my arm, her grip noticeably tightening. "Do you think it's a person doing this, or something else?" Her voice wavered between curiosity and fear. "I don't know," I responded, "but I'm not eager to find out." The idea of meeting whoever or whatever was behind these unsettling messages filled me with dread. Eleanor nodded, and we proceeded. It didn't take long before we found another message, even more straightforward. "Leave," carved into another tree. "This is getting creepier by the minute," Eleanor admitted, her voice shaky. "Yeah," I agreed, swallowing hard. "Let's just make sure our perimeter is secure, then we can head back and figure out what to do next." Eleanor nodded. With one last sweeping glance at the haunting messages, we continued our exploration. We were running out of time and options, but ensuring the immediate area around the cabin was clear became our priority. As we made our way back to the cabin, Eleanor stopped suddenly and pointed ahead. "Look," she said, her voice tinged with apprehension. My eyes followed her finger to an oddly shaped mound of snow against the trunk of a large tree. A surge of adrenaline rushed through me as I moved closer. Cautiously, using the stick, I brushed away the piled-up snow. What I discovered made my heart sink. Beneath the icy crust were our remaining cans of food, empty and punctured. A wave of dread flooded over me, elevating our already dangerous situation into something far more urgent. "We need to think of something else. Fast," Eleanor declared. "Absolutely right," I agreed. The onset of panic was becoming harder to suppress. "We could aim for the road," I offered, thinking aloud. "It's a couple of miles through this forest, but if we get there, maybe we can flag down a car or find the nearest house. They might have a landline we can use." Eleanor's eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of resolve and trepidation. "It's a gamble," she said, "but it's not like we have a ton of alternatives, do we?" "We certainly don't," I conceded, feeling the weight of our situation. My gut churned with anxiety, but I forced myself to maintain composure. Falling apart wouldn't help. "First thing in the morning, we pack up whatever might help us and get moving," Eleanor advised. "It's going to be a tough trek. We should take whatever advantage we can muster." "I'm with you," I affirmed, my mind racing through a mental inventory of what we should bring. Water bottles, a couple of blankets for warmth, and the first aid kit in case of emergencies. "Let's head back and get everything ready. We leave as soon as the sun comes up." Retracing our steps through the unsettling quiet of the forest, an unnerving feeling persisted that we were being watched. The subtle noises around us, the soft rustle of a wind-shaken branch, the occasional crunch of compacted snow, were as if the forest itself was issuing us a warning. But we had made up our minds. We were leaving. Yet the journey back to the cabin was filled with dread. Both of us were acutely aware that the night ahead would stretch on endlessly, punctuated by jolts of fear and swells of uncertainty. Upon entering the cabin, I immediately locked the door. But the action felt more like a token measure than real security. The cabin's walls seemed to close in on us, turning what should have been a sanctuary into a trap from which we must escape as soon as possible. With restless energy, Eleanor scanned the room, her gaze moving quickly over the rustic furniture, faded curtains, and worn rug. It was as if she were searching for an escape route or a hidden clue. Her attention stopped at a peculiar warp in one of the floorboards near the fireplace. Using a pocket knife, she managed to lift the board, exposing a hidden compartment. Curious, she reached in and pulled out a bundle of newspapers. The papers were old, yellowed by time, and bound together with fraying string. Her hands shook a little as she untied the bundle and started thumbing through the headlines, her eyes growing wider with each passing second. "You have to read this," she urged, thrusting a folded paper into my hands. I took it from her and started reading. The newspaper was dated several decades ago, but the information it contained gripped my attention immediately. It featured tales of a creature said to roam these woods, tales passed down from the earliest settlers to the present day. The article included various accounts from the community: livestock vanishing from pens, unidentifiable tracks found in the mud, and disturbing sounds, howls and roars, emanating deep within the forest at night. Notably, the article mentioned that despite many efforts, no one had ever captured the creature on camera or trapped it. The final line served as a chilling caution, warning anyone who dared to venture into these woods to be prepared for the worst. The realization that our situation might be even more dire than we'd thought settled in, tightening the knot of anxiety already in my stomach. "We might not be dealing with a person," Eleanor said. Her statement hung in the air. The room grew cold. Or perhaps it was just the chill running through my veins, making it seem that way. A sudden, deafening roar burst from outside, cutting through the tense atmosphere. The sound penetrated the cabin's walls as if they were made of paper, reverberating through the air and filling the space with a sense of impending doom. This roar was unlike anything I could identify. It was neither human nor any animal I was familiar with. It was an otherworldly sound. A shiver cascaded down my spine, amplifying the sense of unease that had enveloped me since we'd discovered those messages carved into the trees. Eleanor and I locked eyes, each of us seeing our own dread reflected back. "We can't stay here anymore," I said. I was aware that going outside was dangerous, but doing nothing and waiting for whatever was out there to find us felt like signing our own death warrants. "We need to be smart about this," Eleanor said, wiping her palms on her jeans. "If we're going up against a creature like this, or even just a deranged person, we need to be prepared." I nodded. "Agreed. We should take inventory of what we have. Anything and everything could be useful." We laid out all the items we thought might aid us. The first aid kit, bottles of water, some rope, a couple of pocket knives, and the flashlight. It wasn't much, but it was all we had. "As soon as dawn breaks, we make a run for it," Eleanor proposed. "The road is a couple of miles through the forest, but if we follow the compass and keep a steady pace, we might just make it." "And if we encounter this thing?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "Then we'll have to face it," she replied. "Because the alternative is waiting here to die, and that's not an option for either of us." Our discussion was abruptly halted by another sound that sent chills down our spines. Footsteps crunching in the snow outside. The noise seemed to circle the cabin, as if whatever was out there was inspecting its prey before striking. We both froze, not daring to breathe. After what felt like an eternity, the sound of footsteps faded, swallowed up by the natural quiet of the forest. But the sense of relief was brief. The night stretched on, one of restless vigilance. We were jumpy, startled by every sound, the wind howling through the trees, the creaking of the cabin settling into its foundation. Sleep came in fitful bursts. Even when our eyes closed, they never fully shut. As dawn's first light seeped through the cabin's windows, I found myself already awake, my eyes snapping open. Eleanor stirred beside me, sensing the change in the room's dim lighting. We exchanged a quick glance, our eyes communicating the shared determination we felt. "Time to get up," I muttered. Eleanor nodded, and we both rose from our makeshift beds, aware that any wasted time could cost us dearly. My hands grabbed the backpacks we prepared the night before, filled with water bottles, some blankets, and a first aid kit. Eleanor checked the flashlight, making sure it still worked, and handed it to me. "Did you pack the knife?" she asked, her eyes locking onto mine. "Yes," I confirmed, showing her the small but sharp blade we'd found in the kitchen drawer. "It's not much, but it's better than going out there completely unarmed." Eleanor zipped up her jacket all the way to her neck and adjusted her gloves, making sure every inch of her skin was covered. The weather was freezing, but our concern for warmth was overshadowed by the worry of what we might encounter out there. "We should double-check everything before we go," I said, examining the contents of the backpack one more time. Food, water, first aid supplies, blankets, and the knife. Looks like we're as ready as we'll ever be." "Agreed," Eleanor affirmed, her voice betraying a hint of fear that matched my own. My hand trembled on the cold metal doorknob as I prepared to unlock the door. Suddenly, the howling wind and pelting snow stopped. The abrupt silence was as unsettling as the ominous noises we'd been hearing all night. Inhaling deeply, we stepped onto the creaking porch and into the outdoors, which seemed to have gone unnaturally still. My eyes adjusted to the dim light. Almost immediately, I spotted two glowing points in the distance, set against the shadowy backdrop of the forest. Those weren't ordinary lights. They were the creature's eyes. It stood about 7 feet tall, its outline barely visible in the darkness. The creature had a muscular frame, and its fur almost blended into the surrounding woods. Its eyes, however, were the most unnerving feature, piercing through the darkness with an intense gaze that seemed to see right into our souls. "Is it letting us go?" Eleanor whispered, her voice a mere wisp in the quiet that surrounded us. "I don't know," I replied, my own voice a tense murmur. "But let's not wait to find out." My eyes remained locked onto the creature's glowing eyes, as if sensing our decision, or perhaps understanding it. The creature turned away, its body blending seamlessly into the dark forest as it moved, its eyes dimming until they were indistinguishable from the surrounding darkness. The feeling of dread that had clenched my chest loosened slightly, replaced by a hint of relief. Wasting no more time, we turned away from the cabin and the haunting forest that had almost become our final resting place. Finally, the clearing came into view. There, parked in the same spot where we'd left it, was our car. A plain, unremarkable sedan, but now the most welcoming sight in the world. "I've never been happier to see a car," Eleanor said. "Me neither," I responded, my hand instinctively going to my pocket for the car keys. They were cold to the touch, but I'd never been so grateful to feel them in my hand. Unlocking the car, we threw our backpacks onto the back seat. The car doors slammed shut behind us. For the first time in what seemed like forever, I felt like we were in a space truly sealed off from the horrors we'd just escaped. I inserted the key into the ignition, half expecting the car not to start, but the engine roared to life. We pulled away. As the cabin and forest receded in the rearview mirror, I felt a profound sense of finality. Whatever was in that forest, whatever we'd experienced, was behind us now, both literally and metaphorically. We drove in silence for a few minutes, neither of us quite ready to put what we'd been through into words. But as the miles rolled by and the dark trees of the forest gave way to the more familiar sights of civilization, the weight of our experience started to lift bit by bit. "We're never going back there," Eleanor finally said, breaking the silence. "Agreed," I replied, my grip on the steering wheel relaxing. Never again. And as we merged onto the highway, leaving behind the road that had led us to that ill-fated cabin, I knew that we weren't just driving away from a place. We were driving away from an experience in our lives. One that neither of us would ever forget, but one that we were both ready to leave firmly in the past. That's the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Have you ever experienced something like this? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like and subscribe button for new stories daily. See you in the next story.